The 9,815th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in Libya. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Libya to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Stephanie Khoury, Deputy Special Representative for Political Affairs for Libya in the United Nations Support Mission in Libya, and Mr. Ali Omar, Director of Libya Crimes Watch. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of council members to document S/2024/895, the report of the Secretary General on the United Nations Support Mission in Libya. At this meeting, the Council will hear briefings by Ms. Stephanie Khoury and Ambassador Kazuyuki Yamazaki, Permanent Representative of Japan, in his capacity as representative of the chair of the Security Council Committee established pursuant to Resolution 1970-2011 concerning Libya. I now give the floor to Ms. Stephanie Khoury.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Council. At the outset, let me first congratulate the Libyan people on the successful holding of local elections held on 16th November in the first group of 58 municipalities across the country. This was a technically sound process organized by the High National Electoral Commission with the support of the police and security forces, which helped ensure a peaceful voting day. The holding of these elections is a reminder that the Libyan people yearn to exercise their right to select those who govern them. Municipal elections for the second group of 60 municipalities is set to start next month, and I urge all authorities to support this. Madam President, in a little over a week, Libya will mark 3 years since the indefinite postponement of national elections in 2021. As unresolved issues continue to stall political progress, Libya's national unity and territorial integrity are under threat. Over the past 8 months, I have met Libyans from all walks of life, and they have repeatedly conveyed to me a sense of urgency and to hold national elections. Libyans are anxious about their country's future. The status quo is unsustainable and has persisted for too long. Unilateral actions pursued by political elites have deeply eroded Libya's institutions into parallel and competing structures. The recent crisis over the leadership of the Central Bank of Libya exposed the fragility of the veneer of stability of Libya's prolonged political stalemate. It also served as a stark reminder that it is high time for Libya to build strong institutions to address issues of uncontrolled spending and a fiscal deficit, establish a stable economy against the backdrop of the possible decrease of global oil prices. Further, the continuing divisions over the leadership of the High Council of State compromise its ability to exercise its functions. This is another sign that Libya's transitional architecture is crumbling under the weight of political polarization and the lack of a clear project for a permanent system of governance. National reconciliation efforts are also increasingly hindered by the political divisions and the vicious cycle of institutional competition. Competition between various armed factors for territorial control and access to resources continue to threaten Libya's stability. 2 days ago, fighting erupted in Zawiya between two armed groups. Minor clashes flared up again in the oil-rich desert of Hamada on 24th October, 6th and 9th November. Although the situation has de-escalated for now, these incidents underscore the risks associated with uncoordinated unilateral troop movements and divided security institutions. Madam President, last night, I have presented to the Libyan people UNSMIL's plan for an inclusive intra-Libyan political initiative to overcome the current political deadlock and move beyond the status quo towards national elections and the renewal of the legitimacy of Libya's expired institutions. I intend to facilitate this process on the basis of the following objectives and principles. 1, first and foremost, preserving stability on the ground. Secondly, pursuing Libyan ownership by building on existing Libyan framework. Thirdly, help unify and strengthen institutions and their legitimacy. Fourthly, inclusivity of Libyan political forces and cultural components. I also intend to facilitate this process through an incrementable, flexible approach to enable progressive building up. This increment is also designed in such a way as to not predetermine any decision made by the next special representative and can be adjusted as appropriate. In line with paragraph 2 and 5 of Resolution 2755 of 2024, UNSMIL intends to establish an advisory committee to develop options for resolving outstanding issues in the electoral framework and to pave the way for the holding of general elections and one government for all Libyans. It is my priority, based on my consultations with Libyans across the country, to address contentious issues in the legal framework for the elections. While the existing framework is the positive outcome of Libyan efforts and a good basis, it remains highly contentious among Libyans and is unlikely to produce a viable and peaceful electoral event without some tweaks. We must be mindful of past experiences, in particular of the failed 2021 election. This is why I intend to establish a time-bound advisory committee tasked to review outstanding issues in the electoral framework and make viable proposals and options for an overall roadmap for the holding of elections. This committee will be composed of Libyan experts and respected personalities who are reflective of the spectrum of Libya's political forces, social, cultural, and geographic components. Madam President, as the controversy of the executive authority ensues, we must be mindful of the successive transitional governments in Libya's decade-long and open-ended interim arrangements. This is why I believe that any unified government that might emerge from Libyan negotiations should be strictly bound by principles, safeguards, milestones, and timelines to take the country to elections as a condition for its international recognition and legitimacy. Madam President, building on ongoing efforts by Libyans, UNSMIL also intends to convene with Libyan partners a structured dialogue to consolidate consensus around a unified national vision for the future of the country. Long-term conflict drivers have remained unaddressed and have prevented Libya to move towards a permanent system of governance, which is centered on a shared collective vision of fundamental issues and relationships between the individuals and the state. Ensuring full, equal, and meaningful participation of all segments of society, particularly youth and women, remain UNSMIL's priority to fostering inclusivity, building national unity, and enhancing the legitimacy of the political process. It is my hope that this process can build an important legacy and support the conclusion of the constitution-making process down the road. UNSMIL is continuing to support Libyan efforts to move forward its economic reforms for the benefit of the Libyan people. UNSMIL will also continue to work to help advance unification of military and security institutions and with the African Union and Libyan partners to advancing national reconciliation. Over the past weeks, I've shared broad parameters of our initiative with Libyan actors, as well as with regional and international partners. I am grateful for the constructive engagement and feedback. That feedback compels me to clarify what this first phase of this initiative is not. The advisory committee is not a dialogue group to take decisions, but rather it is to generate options for use in a follow-on phase by Libyan decision makers. Madam President, I am mindful of mounting challenges that must be overcome. 2.5 months after the resolution of the leadership crisis at the Central Bank of Libya, I am encouraged by steps taken to improve governance. The reinstatement of the Central Bank's Board of Directors on 21st October is an important milestone following its suspension for over a decade. To effectively implement monetary policy and contribute to economic stabilization, the CBL leadership, the central bank leadership, and the board must be free to act independently, transparently, integrity, without conflicts of interest, in concert with other oversight institutions. Immediate priority to support the central bank's stabilization efforts, I urge Libyan decision makers to urgently agree on a framework for spending in 2025 with agreed limits and oversights. I would also like to reinforce the critical importance of safeguarding the independence of Libya's oversight institutions and for authorities to adhere to governance principles of transparency and anti-corruption as outlined in the Libya political agreement and successive resolutions by this council. Madam President, arbitrary arrests and detentions persist across the country. Despite progress in the areas of capacity building and partial access to detention facilities, I call on Libyan authorities to grant UNSMIL unimpeded access to all detention centers. I am very concerned about deaths in custody. Since I last briefed the council, 4 Libyans, including 2 women, have died in custody. Transparent investigations into these deaths are needed, and those responsible must be held accountable. Regional instability also has a grave impact on Libya. Since the start of the Sudanese conflict in 2023, an exponentially growing number of Sudanese refugees have crossed into Libya, with 500 on average arriving daily. The human rights and protection conditions faced by migrants and refugees remains a UN top priority. I urge all stakeholders to ensure that migration management comports with international human rights law, and the UN remains committed to assisting us. Madam President, closing. That largely remains the backdrop of to support the statement, as well as regional to help solve unify institutions.
Ms. Corey, we are unable to hear
Yes.
you, starting from in closing. Nope, not yet. Let's try again.
Okay.
Better.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. President. Closing is going to remain large. It is neither stable against the back regional changes and growing economic. We must collectively seize the opportunity to achieve a lasting political settlement. Members of this council, as well as regional.
Ms. Corey, we still can't hear you. So we're going to disconnect and come back to you, and I will move to the civil society briefer, to Ambassador Kazuyuki Yamazaki, and we will come back to you for your closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I now give the floor to Ambassador Kazuyuki Yamazaki.
Thank you, Madam President. In accordance with paragraph 24E of Resolution 1970 of the 26th February 2011, I have the honor to report to the Security Council on the work of the committee established pursuant to the same resolution. The report covers the period from 10th October to 16th December 2024. During this time, the committee met twice in informal consultations and conducted additional work using the silence procedure with the aim of facilitating the implementation of the sanctions measures. Madam President, most recently, in informal consultation on 12th December, the committee met with a delegation of the Libyan Investment Authority, a listed entity at its request, on issues pertaining to the implementation of the assets freeze. Remarks were also made by the representative of Libya. An interactive discussion followed. Earlier, in informal consultation on 5th December, the committee heard a presentation by the panel of experts on its final report submitted in accordance with the Resolution 2701. The panel also submitted separately to the committee information on individuals who in the panel's assessment meet the sanctions designation criteria. The final report was submitted to the Council on 13th December, hence I will not summarize its findings. In the interactive discussion that ensued, committee members expressed their support for the work of the panel. The committee members are currently considering the recommendations addressed to the committee by the panel for possible follow-up action. During the informal consultations, a committee member raised a question to me regarding the possibility of organizing a committee visit, to which I expressed my openness as a chair to discussing the matter with the committee members during the remainder of my tenure as a chair and to convey the message to the incoming chair. With respect to the arms embargo, the committee received a report on a vessel inspection conducted by EU NAVFOR Med Operation Irini, submitted pursuant to Resolutions 2292 and 2733. One committee member expressed varying views on the matter. The committee also received a report on an attempted vessel inspection by Operation EU NAVFOR Med Operation Irini. Concerning the assets freeze, no negative decision was taken by the committee in relation to 6 notifications invoking paragraph 19A of Resolution 1970, submitted by Bahrain. Following the receipt of technical inputs, as requested by the committee, from the panel of experts on 3 additional exemption notifications invoking paragraph 90A received by the committee, 2 from Bahrain and 1 as previously submitted by Luxembourg. The committee is currently considering responses to those notifications. The committee is further considering additional information provided by Bahrain on 2 previously submitted notifications invoking paragraph 21 of Resolution 1970, as well as a request to transfer certain frozen assets from one jurisdiction to another. The committee responded to Belgium on a previously submitted notification invoking paragraph 21. The committee acknowledged updates to the Libyan Investment Authority's short-term investment plan conveyed by Libya. Finally, the committee is considering a letter from the Libyan Investment Authority through Libya on the status of specific assets freeze exemption notifications, as well as a letter from Libya on committee correspondence. Madam President, the committee continues its consideration of the delisting request received through the focal point for delisting established pursuant to Resolution 7030. In connection with the informal consultations held in early June by the committee to consider the interim report of the panel of experts, 2 matters continue to be under consideration by the committee. In conclusion, Madam Chair, I would like to reiterate the committee's commitment to contributing to the promotion of peace and stability in Libya. As this is my last periodic report to the Council, I would also like to thank the members of the committee, the Secretariat, and the staff of my own mission for their cooperation during my chairpersonship. Thank you.
Yamazaki for his briefing. I now give the floor back to Ms. Stephanie Khoury for her closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam President. In closing, Libya's guns largely remain silent, but it is neither stable nor at peace. Against the backdrop of persistent foreign involvement, regional changes, and growing economic headwinds, we must collectively seize the opportunity to achieve a lasting political settlement. Members of this council, as well as regional and international actors, have a concrete opportunity and obligation to help Libyans resolve their differences, reunify institutions, and move toward a democratic, rule-based system of governance. Libya has the potential to become a beacon of stability and prosperity for the Mediterranean region and beyond, and one that serves its people. The success of the UN-facilitated political process, first and foremost, requires political will and Libyan actors to refrain from unilateral actions that continue to entrench institutional divisions and polarization. Unity of purpose and coordinated support from Libya's regional and international partners is equally critical. The Libyan people have shown that not only do they desire change, but they have the capacity to reach agreements, to compromise and make lasting progress and hold elections. And they need your unified support. Thank you, Madam President and members of the Council.
I thank Ms. Khoury for her statement, and I now give the floor to Mr. Ali Omar. Mr. Omar, you have the floor.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Security Council, thank you for granting me this opportunity to address you today. My name is Ali. I'm a Libyan activist and a human rights defender and a former prisoner of conscience. I speak to you from exile as the director of Libya Crimes Watch, an organization dedicated for over 5 years to monitoring and documenting human rights violations in Libya and advocating for accountability. I speak to you today to convey the voices of victims and survivors who endure in silence under the weight of daily violations and crimes in Libya. Since the beginning of this year, LCW, our organization, has documented 281 grave human rights violations perpetrated by both Eastern and Western authorities in Libya. These figures are not mere statistics, but reflect harrowing stories and real tragedies of victims, including the most vulnerable groups such as women and migrants, as well as activists, journalists, lawyers, and others. These violations include torture in prisons, arbitrary arrests, enforced disappearances, and extrajudicial killings. Such practices not only destroy the lives of individuals and their families, but also sow fear throughout society and undermine any hope for peace. These heinous crimes are not isolated acts, but systematic and recurrent, carried out and overseen by security agencies and military groups affiliated with all parties to the conflict in Libya, including the Libyan Armed Arab Forces, the Government of National Unity, the government endorsed by the Libyan House of Representatives in the East, and the Libyan Presidential Council. Madam President, prisons and unofficial detention centers represent a dangerous and ongoing phenomenon. In these places, human dignity is stripped away and individuals are treated as mere numbers without value. For instance, in November last year, LCW documented the death under torture of 3 detainees in an unofficial detention center in Benghazi, including a woman and 2 followers of Sufi orders, and Sufi orders are one of the minorities subjected to violations for years. Madam President, distinguished members, civil society in Libya continues to face systematic repression and ongoing intimidation. This year alone, LCW documented the arrest of over 50 female and male activists by security and military agencies in eastern and western Libya on vague charges justified by repressive laws such as the anti-cybercrime law and the anti-terrorism law. Numerous decisions and regulations have further restricted the work of local and international organizations, making civil work from inside Libya nearly impossible, and forcing many activists to flee and operate from exile. In October 2023, LCW documented the arbitrary detention of 5 political activists in Benghazi by the Internal Security Agency for 10 months without trial. In April of this year, one of these detainees died under mysterious circumstances in the prison with no investigation conducted. To this day, freedom of expression in Libya remains a crime. In September, security forces in the east arrested 16 individuals, including 4 children, for participating in a demonstration supporting the former regime. Following the catastrophic collapse of the Derna dams in September 2023, demonstrators were arrested for expressing their opinions and demanding accountability for corruption and negligence, which have led to deaths of thousands of innocent people in Derna. As this council mandates the United Nations Support Mission in Libya to oversee elections, ensuring a safe and conducive environment for free elections has become an urgent priority. This includes protecting the fundamental right to freedom of expression and involving all groups, including vulnerable communities, minorities, and civil society. This is a prerequisite for guaranteeing the integrity of elections in Libya. Madam President, the persistence of these violations poses a serious threat to social peace and stability in Libya. The political division and continuation of illegitimate bodies deepen the crisis and hinder accountability. The failure of past political processes has not only prolonged the conflict, but also created a breeding ground for impunity. Therefore, the Security Council must act now by shifting its focus to one where accountability is prioritized. Madam President, how can a country where individuals accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity hold the senior positions of power, how can such a country organize fair and transparent elections? Libyan civil society and human rights movement in exile demand that accountability takes precedence over any electoral process. No political process can succeed when justice is obstructed and impunity reigns. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, we urge the Security Council and Member States to take decisive action to end the prolonged conflict and political division in Libya. Accountability must be a top priority before any political or electoral process. Therefore, we call for the establishment of an independent international mechanism to investigate violations and hold perpetrators accountable. Such a mechanism is essential for identifying individuals who exploit impunity to obstruct the political and transitional justice processes. It will also ensure an environment conducive to enabling the Libyan nation to determine its future through fair and free elections that reflect the aspirations of all. We further call on the Security Council to enhance UNSMIL's mandate with a greater focus on protecting human rights and monitoring violations. UNSMIL should work directly with Libyan authorities in both the east and west to end arbitrary detentions, halt torture in prisons and unofficial detention centers, release all arbitrarily detained individuals, and reveal the fate of those forcibly disappeared. We also stress the need for the Security Council and member states to collectively press Libyan authorities and all parties to the conflict to cease ongoing violations and international crimes, protect civil society, and end the campaigns of repression against human rights defenders and activists. A stable and secure future for Libya cannot be built without respecting fundamental freedoms, including freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. In conclusion, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to look into the eyes of the victims everywhere and listen to their voices. Your decisions today hold the power to make a tangible difference in the lives of millions. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Omar for his briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. Let me thank the SRSG Kuri, Ambassador Kazuyuki, and Mr. Omar for their briefings this morning. I also welcome the participation of the Permanent Representative of Libya at our meeting. Colleagues, the briefers have given us a stark assessment of the fragile stalemate in Libya. The current situation is unsustainable, with some Libyan actors pursuing their own interests, benefiting only a handful of Libya's elites. The Libyan people deserve political stability in a unified country with peace, security, and prosperity. I would like to make 3 points today. First, we welcome the successful first phase of municipal elections in Libya, marking the first time Libyans have gone to the polls in over a decade. We must build on this success. We call on Libyan authorities to provide the necessary resources and leadership for the second phase. Second, we welcome the plan the SRSG Kuri has outlined today for a new, inclusive, Libyan-led effort to lead the country towards elections and a sustainable, secure, prosperous future. The UN plan provides a framework, but the solutions can only come from Libyans themselves. We encourage Libya's leaders to engage with the UN process in good faith and with the spirit of compromise for the benefit of all Libyans. We stress our continued support to UNSMIL and DSRSG Kuri in the implementation of her plan to achieve a long-term political solution and to enable elections. Third, we welcome the panel of experts' recent report and recommendations. We share their concerns around the continued ineffectiveness of the arms embargo, the increasing smuggling of diesel, and the violations and abuses of human rights. We look forward to working with Council members to renew the sanctions regime and panel of experts mandate next month. Finally, President, we encourage the UN to appoint a new special representative as soon as possible. President, with international unity and the engagement of Libya's leaders, we can work together to find political solutions and enable a better future for the Libyan people. The UK fully supports the efforts of the UN and DSRSG Kuri in achieving this. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Madam President, I have the privilege to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3+, namely Guyana, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, and my own country, Algeria. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to Ms. Stephanie Kuri, the SRSG and head of UNSMIL, for her insightful briefing and update on the situation in Libya. We wish to thank Ambassador Kazuyuki Yamazaki for his briefing on the work of the 1970 Sanctions Committee, we also welcome the presence of the permanent representative of Libya in today's meeting. Madam President, the A3 Plus welcomes the successful conduct of municipal elections in 58 municipalities across Libya, marking an important step towards strengthening local governance and promoting stability in the country. We commend the High National Election Commission for the successful management of this democratic process. We also recognize the critical role played by UN SMIL, Libyan authorities, civil societies, and all actors involved in ensuring the security of electoral operation across the country. Our group urges the relevant authorities to support the newly elected municipal leader as they work towards delivering services to the Libyan people. We welcome the announcement of the High National Election Commission regarding the start of the electoral process for a new list of 59 municipalities next January. This step is vital for strengthening democracy and empowering citizens to shape the future of Libya. Madam President, the A3 Plus welcomes and fully supports the appointment of the Board of Directors for the Central Bank of Libya. We see this development as a crucial step towards implementing the UN SMIL facilitated CBL agreement signed last September. This breakthrough is crucial for safeguarding CBL's independence, integrity, transparency, and accountability. And this development will enable the effective management of Libya's monetary policy, ultimately contributing to the country's economic stability and prosperity. Libya's leaders have demonstrated their commitment to the nation's interest by successfully holding local elections and appointing CBL boards of directors. To build on this momentum, we urge Libyan actors and institutions to refrain from actions that can undermine these positive steps, reverse unilateral measures that fuel tensions, and prioritize dialogue and cooperation without precondition and in a spirit of compromise. It is imperative to address the deepening institutional divisions and erosion of trust among Libyan actors, which could have severe consequences. The role of the United Nations remains crucial in facilitating a Libyan-led national dialogue among key stakeholders. This dialogue is a necessary starting point for resolving outstanding issues, conducting successful national elections, and unifying Libyan institutions. Reaching consensus on these critical issues is essential for the success of Libya's election, Libya's national election, a cornerstone of the country's progress. We strongly encourage further steps to cement a stable political landscape, including unifying state and institutions. With this in mind, our group, the A3+, reiterates the importance of unified focus on resolving outstanding issues related to the electoral framework, with a view to removing key obstacles on the path of national elections. In this regard, the A3+ welcomes UN-SMIL proposal to revitalize Libya's political process, to foster trust among key stakeholders, and pave the way for national elections, while preserving stability on the ground. It is crucial that all parties involved in the Libyan crisis fully support and participate in UN-SMIL mediation efforts in good faith and without preconditions. Inclusive participation is key to achieving a sustainable and peaceful settlement, ensuring that everyone, especially women and youth, has a meaningful and safe opportunity to contribute to the future of Libya is essential. Their active involvement in the political process empowers these groups and fosters a more representative and just governance structure. As we approach to the end of the UN-SMIL mandate next January, the A3+ expresses deep concern that there has been little progress in appointing a new SRSG. This appointment is crucial and urgent, as it can enable the automatic extension of the mandate of a further 9 months. We stress that continuity is vital to addressing the outstanding issues related to the electoral laws, and strongly reiterate our call for the appointment of the SRSG and head of UN-SMIL. Madam President, we take positive note of the meeting held in Tunis on the 5th and 6th December to discuss the draft law on reconciliation proposed by the Presidency Council. We look forward to the finalization to ensure a fair, transparent process that responds to the needs of the victims of gross human rights violation and promotes right-based reconciliation in Libya. We also warmly welcome the announcement by the chairman of the African Union High-Level Committee on Libya regarding the forthcoming National Reconciliation Charter, which is slated for presentation to the Libyans in the upcoming National Reconciliation Conference. Together, these two instruments can facilitate a comprehensive and inclusive reconciliation process. Madam President, the A3+ remains deeply concerned by the ongoing security challenges in Libya, including persistent clashes between armed groups, despite the 2020 ceasefire agreement. Yesterday, we have witnessed again serious clashes in Zawiya around the key oil refinery in western Libya. The continued presence of foreign forces, of foreign fighters and mercenaries exacerbates tension and threatens Libya's sovereignty. We demand their immediate and complete withdrawal to create an environment conducive to political dialogue and lasting stability. The A3+ is gravely concerned by the finding of the panel of experts on the total ineffectiveness of the arms embargo, a critical component of our strategy to protect Libyan civilians. Despite the embargo set by the United Nations Security Council in 2011, weapons continue to flow in Libya, fueling the conflict, and we all urge all member states to fully respect the arms embargo. The panel of expert report also reveals alarming violation on the protection of Libyan financial assets, undermining their intended purpose of benefiting the Libyan people in the future. This systematic depletion of these financial resources through excessive bank fees and illicit transfers is unacceptable. The credibility of this Council hinges on our ability to halt the depletion of Libyan financial resources frozen by the Security Council resolution. Let us remind that the sanction regime against Libya should not be a punitive measure, but rather a protective mechanism, a shield designed to foster peace and prosperity for all Libyans. Madam President, the humanitarian situation in Libya, especially the massive movement of migrants and refugees from African and other regions experiencing instability, highlights the urgent need for streamlining humanitarian aid and coordinated effort from Libyan institutions. International cooperation is therefore crucial to ensure their safety, dignity, and human rights. We call upon Libyan authorities to uphold the principles of human rights. It is crucial to create a society where all individuals, including women and youth, can thrive and contribute to the nation's progress. To conclude, Madam President, the A3+ would like to express its full support to UN SMIL in facilitating an inclusive, intra-Libyan and multi-track process to unblock the current political stalemate. The A3 Plus seized this occasion to reaffirm its unwavering solidarity with the resilient people of Libya during these challenging times. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, President. I also thank Deputy Special Representative Kuri, Mr. Omar, and Ambassador Yamakazi of Japan in his capacity as chair of the 1970s Sanction Committee for their briefing. Since this is Ambassador Yamakazi's final briefing, I wish to take the opportunity to thank him and his team for their tireless work as chair of the 1970 committee for the past 2 years. Malta remains deeply committed to advancing a Libyan-led and Libyan-owned political process under the UN auspices. This remains the only pathway for Libya to prosper. We are encouraged by certain developments that demonstrate the willingness and ability of some Libyan parties to overcome their political differences. We welcome the UNSMIL-facilitated agreement seeking to address the institutional crisis of the Central Bank of Libya. The resolution of this crisis must serve as a foundation to address Libya's economic and financial challenges. These include reaching consensus on a unified national budget, ensuring a depoliticized approach to managing Libya's national resources, and strengthening the equitable and transparent disbursement of state funds. We are similarly encouraged by the successful municipal elections across Libya and the organization of such elections by the High National Elections Commission. This demonstrates the wish of the Libyan people to participate in electoral processes and must be extended to the national level. The positive support of UNSMIL in these developments reflects the central and constructive role the mission can play, supporting UNSMIL and engaging constructively in the appointment of a new SRSG remains paramount. President, these positive steps must be contextualized, as political intransigences also persist. The broader situation remains largely an impasse, with little progress in overcoming some pressing issues. The ongoing leadership disputes within the High Council of State continues to undermine this institution and hinders its ability to fulfill its role in line with the Libyan political agreement. Neither can we forget about the lack of agreement between the House of Representatives and the Supreme Court on adjudicating constitutional matters, and the lack of movement in advancing a national reconciliation process. These too reflect a propensity towards unilateral actions that undermine trust and entrench institutional divides. To overcome Libya's various divides, all Libyan political actors must engage with each other in a constructive and transparent manner. We fully support Deputy Special Representative Kuri in this endeavour to break the political deadlock. President, gender equality and ensuring the full, equal, meaningful and safe participation of women in this process and subsequent national elections is of critical importance. The political uncertainties have serious ramifications on all aspects of life in Libya. The security situation remains volatile. Frequent clashes between armed groups often lead to civilian casualties. A unified military and security apparatus is urgently needed. The presence of foreign fighters, foreign forces and mercenaries, the proliferation of weapons, and the conflict in Sudan are additional destabilizing factors. Measures seeking to fully implement the Libyan arms embargo, including Operation Irini, continue to require our full support. Full compliance with the 1970 sanctions framework remains equally essential. The asset freeze is meant to exist for the benefit of the Libyan people, and Libyan funds held abroad must continue to be safeguarded. the importance of fostering an enabling environment for civil society, as well as advancing the rights of women and young persons, cannot be overstated. Ensuring freedom of movement, the right to work, and active participation in public life will contribute significantly to Libya's progress. In this regard, UNSMIL's ongoing efforts to promote human rights protections remains invaluable. President, during our term on the Council, we have strived to ensure that the voices of the Libyan people are heard. Their aspirations for peace, democracy, and stability remain central to our deliberations. We repeat our call on all Libyan political actors, regional countries, and the international community to work together and establish the necessary framework for this right to be realized. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, I'd like to thank Deputy Special Representative Stephanie Curry for her briefing. I also thank Ambassador Yamaki Kazuyuki for his own briefing and also for his work at the head of the 1970 committee. And finally, I'd like to thank Mr. Ali Omar for his testimony as well. And we welcome among us the representative of Libya. 3 points, Madam President. Firstly, France welcomes the peaceful holding of the first phase of Libyan municipal elections in 58 municipalities on the 16th of November. We welcome the role played by the High Electoral Commission, Libyan authorities, and civil society with the assistance of the UN. These first elections in 10 years are an important step, and they reflect the determination of Libyans to participate in democratic life in their country. We hope that the second phase of municipal elections at the beginning of 2025 will run smoothly. 2, this positive step should prompt Libyan actors to relaunch the political process in cooperation with the UN support mission in Libya. We welcome the actions of the Deputy Special Representative, Ms. Stephanie Curry, and the mediation work she has undertaken in recent months with Libyan players. We support UNSMIL's efforts to assist in forming a unified government and even to organize simultaneous presidential and legislative elections pursuant to the wishes of the Libyan people. France encourages all Libyan parties to engage in peaceful talks to that end. Only the conclusion of this political process will enable Libya to restore its unity, stability, and sovereignty. We reiterate our support for the Secretary-General's efforts to appoint a special representative for Libya who could draw on the initiatives put in place by Ms. Curry. Madam President, we remain concerned at the volatility of the security situation in Libya in a context of great regional instability. Stability and sovereignty in the country can only be guaranteed through the full implementation of the 2021 Action Plan endorsed by the United Nations on the withdrawal of foreign forces, foreign fighters, and all mercenaries from Libya. We reiterate our support for the 5+5 Committee's efforts to reunify the Libyan military and security institutions and to implement the 2020 ceasefire agreement. Respect for that is essential. We welcome the Security Working Group from the Berlin process, which France co-chairs, and we welcome the fact that that group was able to meet on the 17th of October in Sirte. We reiterate our concern at the numerous human rights violations in Libya, including arrests, arbitrary detentions, and the situation of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. We are grateful to the Deputy Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Libya and the head of the UN support mission in Libya, Madam Stephanie Curry, and the permanent representative of Japan, Mr. Kazuki Yamazaki, for their reports. We listened attentively to the statement delivered by Mr. Ali Omar as well. We welcome the presence among us of the permanent representative of Libya. Distinguished colleagues, The situation in Libya continues to give rise to grave concern for us. The political process in that country remains at a deadlock. Despite the numerous attempts undertaken to change this situation, which nobody welcomes. The country's political future is not yet within sight, and consequently, the situation on the ground continues to deteriorate, and this includes the security situation. The clashes of armed groups have become a grim reality of daily life in that country. Under these circumstances, we completely understand the desire of ordinary Libyans to, at the soonest, to see positive changes that pave the way for progressive development or prospects for progressive development of their country. We note that domestic Libyan players are not encouraged either by the situation that has unfolded in connection with the protracted transitional period, and this is linked to the Secretary General's forthcoming appointment of a new special representative on Libya. We call upon Mr. Guterres to, at the soonest, present to the Security Council a candidate for this exceedingly important position. More than half a year has already elapsed since Ms. Abdullah Batali has stepped down. We are concerned that the Security Council is already approaching a deadline which is both artificial and completely unnecessary. That is 31 January 2025, when a candidate needs to be appointed for the UNSMIL mandate to be extended. Very little time remains until that deadline. It is difficult not to note the activity of Stephanie Kouri, which is specifically focused on resolving the crisis around the Libyan Central Bank. It is important for the United Nations mission, even in the transition period, to remain afloat, and for the Libyan people themselves not to lose sight of the presence of the United Nations. At the same time, the task for the current UN team in Tripoli at the present juncture, in our view, is purely to set the stage to facilitate the future new wave of UN mediation and to support the Libyan political process. There's a need for the acting special representative during this period not to overstep this framework, not to advance far-reaching initiatives and plans, and not to introduce innovations which are not fully rooted in the consensus-based support of key Libya players. Madam President, against the backdrop of the deepening divide among the Libyan protagonists, we wish to also flag the following factors which inspire optimism. We specifically welcome the conduct of the first round of municipal elections in the country. The record high voter turnout levels reflect the fact that ordinary Libyans are not indifferent when it comes to the fate of their country. They wish to do everything possible to the extent that they're able to contribute. And Libya's High Election Commission can harness the experience gained in organizing the elections, to which there is still no alternative. Equally important is the national reconciliation track. We have observed a scaling up of the corresponding efforts undertaken by the African Union and the personal, unremitting focus by the President of the Republic of Congo, Denis Sassou Nguesso. Presently, more than ever before, there's a need for assiduous, well-thought-through efforts to be undertaken with the Libyans, and which needs to take into account the positions and the visions of all influential Libyan forces. At the same time, intra-Libyan dialogue needs to be Libyan-owned and Libyan-led. This principle is also reflected in the relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions. Excessive pressure on the Libyan leaders, even when driven by the noblest of intentions, can backfire. There is an important need to draw lessons from past errors of the international presence in the former Jamahiriya. Furthermore, there's a need to bear in mind the importance of inclusivity. If certain political forces in Libya perceive that they are being sidelined, then the work undertaken will fail to bear fruit. Madam President, we remain firmly convinced of the fact that in order to redress the situation in Libya, there's a need for the entire international community to pool efforts. Leadership here is entrusted to our United Nations. We would be well advised to leverage the fact that the UN Security Council members, including permanent members, do not have visible political disagreements on the Libyan file. Once again, we stress that the Russian Federation stands ready to cooperate constructively on the Libya file with all interested parties. Against this backdrop, we are bewildered at the ongoing attempts by Western countries to organize various coteries and separate configurations on Libya. A stark negative example here was something which was held in early December. I refer to the conference held in London's Wilton Park, to which it was not deemed necessary to invite a number of influential international and regional players and even the Libyans themselves. At the same time, during this conference, the issue was raised of developing a roadmap for Libyan settlement. Unfortunately, the wrong message was also sent to organizers with inclusion in this gathering by the acting special representative. Nothing other than damage to UN mediation and the standing of the United Nations Security Council should be expected of such initiatives. Furthermore, not only do they not add any added value in resolving the situation in Libya, but they can also inflict serious damage here. It is also important to note that what we observed recently, I refer to the excessive interest by Tripoli's Western partners vis-à-vis overseeing the work of key Libyan financial economic structures, that this exceeds the framework of the tasks set out under Security Council resolutions. Madam President, finally, to conclude, I wish to draw attention to the problem of the frozen Libyan assets. The most serious concern here is linked to the practice that has unfolded of interference in these assets undertaken by a number of Western banks and financial structures. And this is also an issue that is regularly highlighted by the Libyan side. Let us recall that these funds have not been blocked to punish any party, but rather to ensure that they are safeguarded. And therein we see the main task of the Council at this present juncture, to safeguard Libyan resources at the current turbulent juncture, so that in the future they can benefit the Libyan people, as is enshrined in the Security Council documents. We urge all countries to approach this question with utmost seriousness and to duly pay heed to the requests of the Libyans. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement, and I now give the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. I extend my gratitude to Deputy SRSG Kuri and Ambassador Kazuyuki Yamazaki of Japan for their briefings. And I also thank Mr. Omar for his sobering remarks, and welcome participation of the Libyan ambassador at today's meeting. Against the backdrop of the stalling political process and the continuing dire humanitarian and human rights situation in Libya, as highlighted by the briefers today, my delegation would like to make the following points. First, we were closely watching the municipal elections last month. It is truly meaningful that the first nationwide local elections in a decade were held in a peaceful manner. Significant turnout of 77% demonstrated the Libyan people's strong yearning for democracy. We believe that these municipal elections were a crucial step towards restoring the legitimacy of institutions in Libya and holding national elections to form a long-delayed unified national government. We urge all Libyan authorities to continue to cooperate with the High National Election Commission during the second round of municipal elections next year. In this regard, my delegation also commends the key assistance role of UNSMIL during the election process. Especially we support the efforts to promote elevated women's participation in the political process. We expect that the proportion of women candidates, which stood at around 20% in the recent local elections, will increase during the future elections. Second, we call upon all parties in Libya to refrain from unilateral actions that deepen institutional division, thus hampering the political process. In this connection, we commend the appointment of the new governor and the board of directors of the Libyan Central Bank. according to the agreement among Libyan authorities. In the same vein, we call for early resolution of disputes regarding the leadership of the High Council of State, particularly considering its vital role in advancing the political process in Libya. Third, the UN Security Council sanctions must be faithfully implemented by all UN member states. We are particularly concerned about the continuous arms provisions by foreign powers to Libya, in clear violation of the arms embargo. This contributes to the growing influence of armed groups and further destabilizes Libya, as well as North Africa and beyond. As illegal arms flows through Libya bolster terrorism and create insecurity in the Sahel region. It should also be reminded that committing acts that violate international humanitarian law or acts that constitute human rights abuses are listing criteria for Security Council targeted sanctions. We are particularly concerned that fragmented statehood exacerbates the migrant and refugee crisis in Libya, which serves as a main migration route through the Mediterranean Sea, posing grave risks in the wider African and European countries. As such, we call on all parties to cooperate with the panel of experts, which is mandated to monitor implementation of Security Council sanctions. We also stress that Libyan frozen assets must be protected for the future benefit of the Libyan people, and we hope that the Council can take concrete actions based on the panel of experts' recommendations, as well as taking into account the Libyan Investment Authority's views. Madam President, in October, the Security Council was able to reaffirm its commitment to the unity and stability of Libya by adopting Resolution 2755. We now expect the Secretary General to appoint a new capable SRSG within the next month. In concluding, Madam President, we call upon all Libyan leaders to seize the window of opportunity generated by recent positive developments and engage faithfully to reach consensus on electoral laws and the political roadmap. In this regard, I appreciate Deputy SRSG Kouri's initiative presented today to advance the political process in Libya and expect positive responses from Libyan leaders. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to thank the Deputy Special Representative in Charge d'Affaires, Stephanie Kouri, for their briefings and their work, and Ambassador Yamazuki and the team for the work throughout the past 2 years, as well as Mr. Ali Omar, founder and director of Libya Crimes Watch, for their statements. I welcome the participation of the representative of Libya during this meeting. As this is our last speech on Libya, as an elected member of the Security Council, we wish to highlight certain aspects that have guided our work over the past 2 years. We are all aware of the fact that the fragmentation of the country and its institutions continues, that human rights violations and abuses, as we have heard once again, continue, and that national elections still seem uncertain, and nonetheless this is urgent. But the measures undertaken at the local level could serve as a basis for far more reaching measures if there is a political will to do so. This is why the Security Council must continue to focus on the following 3 points. First, and we thank once again the DSRSG Kouri for presenting the action lines of UNSMIL's strategy towards an inclusive political process. We will continue to work alongside UNSMIL to promote a Libyan political process based on the 6 principles described by DSRSG Kouri. In this respect, Switzerland stands ready to make its peace policy instruments, particularly as regards human rights and international humanitarian law, to which we are all committed alongside UNSMIL and the Netherlands, available. Furthermore, Switzerland remains committed to the Presidential Council and the African Union in favor of an inclusive reconciliation process based on the rule of law. In this respect, we encourage the relevant authorities to stop delaying the adoption of a law that complies with international principles in this area and is linked to the political process. Like UNSMIL, Switzerland welcomes the holding of municipal elections in Libya. This represents a crucial opportunity for the Libyan people to exercise their right to choose their representatives and to promote responsible governance. Finally, we also encourage the Secretary General to appoint a special representative of the Secretary General as soon as possible. Secondly, it is essential to create an environment conducive to the political process. This includes, inter alia, preventing violations of international humanitarian law and human rights. On 16 December 1966, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly. This covenant contains important guarantees to protect the civil and political liberties of individuals and has been ratified by Libya. Switzerland has, over the past 24 years, tirelessly reiterated that an electoral process guaranteeing the participation of women and all minorities, as well as a free and secure civic space, requires an improvement in the human rights situation in Libya. In this context, we wish to highlight an important step, the signing of a declaration of intent between the Presidential Council and the co-chairs of the Working Group on International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights in May 2023. This declaration aims to ensure the centrality of human rights at all stages of the political and reconciliation process and establishes an inclusive and regular dialogue between the signatories to this end. Thirdly, the security situation remains fragile. Armed groups wield considerable influence, and clashes between them harm the civilian population. Actions that could heighten tensions, undermine confidence, and further entrench institutional divisions and discord among Libyans must be avoided. We call upon the main actors to engage in dialogue and compromise. All members of the international community must support this cause in a consistent way. Furthermore, we wish to express our concern about the increasing leniency of member states vis-à-vis violations of the sanctions regime, in particular the arms embargo and illicit oil exports, as highlighted in the latest report of the panel of experts mandated by this Council. The lack of coherence and respect for international instruments designed to promote peace and stability in Libya will have long-term consequences, not only in Libya, but in the region as a whole. Therefore, we call upon the entire international community to respect their commitments and to promote peace in Libya. Madam President, I wish to recall the words of Hala Bouhaghis, civil society briefer last October here. She stressed, I quote, that peace mediation efforts must be based on a concept of responsibility sharing, not just power sharing, end of quote. Switzerland stands ready to continue its commitment to that end. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I thank Deputy Special Representative Kuri and Chair of the 1970 Committee Ambassador Yamazaki for their briefings and listened carefully to the statement by the civil society representative. In recent months, Libya, with the support of UNSMIL and other international partners, has seen the central bank crisis resolved and the political and security situation largely stable, with positive signs emerging. At the same time, there are still differences among parties in the country, stalling the political process and presaging a long and arduous way towards national unity. I'd like to emphasize the following points. First, continuously promoting political dialogue. The recent successful holding of council elections in 58 municipalities across Libya is an important step in advancing the political process and strengthening local governance, which China welcomes. We note the latest recommendations and measures by the DSRSG Kuri to facilitate the political process in Libya. We encourage all parties concerned in Libya to cooperate actively with a commitment to dialogue and consultation towards an early consensus on the holding of general and parliamentary elections. It is our hope that the Secretary General will expeditiously appoint a new special representative for Libya in accordance with the Security Council resolution and after fully consulting relevant parties to provide more good offices in support of bridging the differences among parties in Libya. Last week, President Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Republic of Congo, chair of the AU High-Level Committee on Libya, visited the country and engaged with all parties to advance the AU-led national reconciliation process, which China recognizes. China supports African solutions to African problems and welcomes a greater role of the African Union in resolving the Libyan issue. Second, addressing security and humanitarian challenges, the Secretary General's report points out the highly volatile situation in western Libya and clashes among armed groups over territory, about which we're deeply concerned. Against this backdrop, all Libyan parties should put the interests of the country and its people first, continue to implement the ceasefire agreement, refrain from any unilateral actions that undermine stability, and maintain the hard-won ease in the situation. The problem of refugees and illegal migrants is a persistent challenge in Libya, with a lasting impact on its security and humanitarian situation, further exacerbated by turmoil in neighboring countries and regions. We call on the international community for closer cooperation and greater support for Libya to prevent the interaction and synergism of various risk factors. Third, developing a reasonable plan for the frozen assets. Libya's frozen assets abroad are the collective wealth of the Libyan people. China fully understands the concerns of the Libyan authorities about the illegal misappropriation or erosion of its assets, supports safeguarding the safety, integrity, and preserved value of frozen assets, and calls on relevant financial institutions to adhere to the principles of transparency and impartiality, and to refrain from any arbitrary misappropriation and abuse. It is our hope that the Council will pay full attention to the legitimate demands of the Libyan authorities, and in connection with the upcoming consultations on the Libyan sanctions resolution, review and adjust the existing asset freezing measures in a timely manner. President, the Libyan issue has dragged on for over a decade, the reason of which is worthy of our deep reflection. It has been proven that external interference and imposed solutions cannot bring peace. China hopes that all parties will respect Libya's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, adhere to the principle of Libyan-led and Libyan-owned in advancing the political reconciliation process, and jointly make tangible efforts to bring Libya back to the right track of peace and development at an early date. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President, and thanks to the Deputy Special Representative Kuri for her update, and Chair of 1970 Sanctions Committee, Ambassador Yamazaki, for his final briefing in this capacity, and of course also Mr. Omar for bringing crucial perspectives to our meeting this morning. I also welcome the permanent representative of Libya. Madam President, in October we welcomed the UN-mediated agreement reached between the House of Representatives and the High Council of State on the crisis surrounding Libya's central bank, which had led to the rapid deterioration of the political, economic, and security conditions in the country. We continue to hope that this agreement could mark a new beginning for future agreements between the parties. This is why today we welcome Deputy Special Representative Kuri's efforts on a multi-track approach which aims to bring together key Libyan actors as well as Libyan grassroots. We look forward to hearing more about this process as work continues, and we call on all Libyan stakeholders to engage constructively in order to overcome the outstanding differences and take the country to long overdue national elections. As we approach a new year, we urge all actors in Libya to refrain from unilateral actions and stress the need for Libya's state institutions to remain free from political interference. Madam President, Slovenia also welcomes the successful holding of a first batch of municipal elections in Libya in November. While no substitute for national elections, this is an important milestone and a critical step in the democratic process. The high turnout demonstrates the keen desire of the Libyan people
to go to the ballot box and exercise their democratic right. We note reports that polling proceeded smoothly and peacefully, and acknowledge the key role played by the High National Elections Commission with support from UNSMIL. Ahead of the commencement of the electoral process for a second group of municipalities in January, we call on Libyan authorities to allocate the necessary resources to this process. We also urge continued prioritization of the participation of women in these elections, both as voters and as candidates, including through the important work of UNSMIL. Madam President, the convening of the Security Work Group of the Berlin process in October with the participation of the 5+5 Joint Military Commission for the first time since July 2023 is an important development. We call for the redoubling of all efforts towards reunifying security and military institutions in Libya and ultimately all of Libya's state institutions. As Mrs. Hala Bogagis warned us in October, we must not let the false sense of political stability in Libya deceive us. There remains much work to be done. Slovenia is concerned by the unprecedented level of influence non-state armed groups have on Libya's affairs, both east and west. Non-state armed groups are also responsible for violations of international humanitarian and human rights law, and the targeting of civilians, including human rights defenders and journalists. This is reprehensible. It is clear that accountability for perpetrators of these crimes is essential in order to establish rule of law and deliver lasting peace and justice for all Libyans. In conclusion, Slovenia reiterates its support to the work of UNSMIL and Deputy Special Representative Corey. We look forward to the extension of the mission's mandate as well as the Libya sanctions regime in January. And we hope to see a special representative appointed expeditiously. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank Deputy Special Representative Kuri, the chair of the 1970 Committee, Ambassador Yamazaki, and Mr. Ali Omar, Director of Libya Crimes Watch, and we welcome the presence of the permanent representative of Libya at this meeting. In December 2021, Libya was on the verge of holding national elections and paving the way to a democracy-based future. 3 years later, it is increasingly obvious that the only way to overcome the political stalemate and achieve peaceful transition is by holding free, inclusive, transparent national elections. Ecuador welcomes the High National Election Commission's announced results of the first round of elections of municipal councils held last November. This is a positive step in restoring the legitimacy of Libyan institutions. My country acknowledges the participation of the population, the work of electoral authorities in the holding of the electoral process, as well as the involvement of security institutions to guarantee safe and peaceful environment. Ecuador supports a Libyan-owned and Libyan-led political and electoral process. We hope that these municipal elections will have laid the foundation for the holding of national elections. In the area of security, we must support the work of the 5+5 Joint Military Commission to set up a joint military force and ensure the effective implementation of the ceasefire agreement. Any effort aimed at unifying the Libyan army is a step towards reconciliation and national unity. In this context, Ecuador sees as positive the recent talks by parties in Tunis to discuss the draft bill on reconciliation proposed by the Presidential Council and the establishment of the National Reconciliation Commission membership. Accountability must be one of the pillars for this process. Success of any political process must be underpinned by economic and financial stability, and that depends on the effective and transparent management of Libyan resources, as well as the responsible and technical handling of institutions such as the central bank. Ecuador reiterates its concern at the violence faced by migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers, and therefore With the support of the international community, we appeal to authorities to work towards improving the situation and breaking up the cross-border networks trafficking in persons throughout the country. President, as this is the last time Ecuador is participating during this period as an elected member of the Council, I wish to express our gratitude to the Deputy Special Representative and UNSMIL for their work. We are certain that UNSMIL is playing a key role in facilitating dialogue among the parties with the goal of building trust, preventing conflicts, and laying the foundation for lasting peace. In that regard, we've taken note of the political process put forward by the Deputy Special Representative. In order to give continuity to UNSMIL's mandate and pursuant to the provisions of Resolution 2755, it is important to move forward with the appointment of a new special representative as soon as possible. In conclusion, I renew my country's commitment to the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Libya. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank the DSSRSG CONI for updating the on-the-ground situation in Libya. I also thank Mr. Omar for his briefing and welcome the permanent representative of Libya, Ambassador Taher El Soni, among us. As I have just completed my last briefing as the chair of the committee pursuant to the Resolution 1970, I would like to repeat my sincere gratitude in my national and personal capacity to the committee members, member states, the panel of experts, and Secretariat, the staff of my mission for their cooperation. In the case of Libya, the sanctions measures, especially the asset freeze on the Libyan Investment Authority, are not punitive, but rather are designed to promote peace and stability in Libya and serve for the future benefit of the Libyan people. I hope the committee will continue to be guided by this principle until this regime accomplishes its purpose. Today, I would like to mention 4 points drawing from what Japan has experienced during its Security Council terms. First, there is an urgent need to revitalize a Libyan-led and Libyan-owned political process facilitated by the United Nations. Over the past several years, there have been some key initiatives to restore the legitimacy and unity of Libya's state institutions through the holding of national elections. These initiatives have not realized a solid outcome, but have clearly shown that stakeholders must compromise to move the process forward. Japan supports the new inclusive approach that Ms. Carney has just announced and calls for political parties to constructively engage, placing the people's interests first instead of their own ambitions. Second, Japan is gravely concerned about the unprecedentedly increased influence of armed groups on state institutions. While welcoming the negotiated resolution of the recent crisis at the Central Bank of Libya, we call on all Libyan parties to refrain from the use of any unilateral and forcible measures that increase tensions, distrust, and fragmentation. In this vein, Japan supports the 5+5 Joint Military Commission in advancing unification of the military and security sectors, and UNSMIL in conducting its conflict prevention mandate. Thirdly, Japan remains concerned about the continuous reports of systemic human rights violations and abuses against Libyans and migrants and excessive restrictions on civic space. We support the role played by civil society and the international community to fight against impunity. We also support their efforts in ensuring the full, equal, effective, meaningful, and safe participation of women and inclusion of youth. Japan also welcomes the Libyan-led transitional justice and national reconciliation process complemented by the United Nations and African Union. Lastly, Japan calls on Security Council to continue to back UNSMIL in a united voice. Under Ms. Carney's leadership, UNSMIL has has conducted various tasks as an integrated mission. Japan calls for the swift appointment of the new SRSG. In the meantime, Council should empower the mission for the upcoming period by smoothly renewing its mandate, even if one is not appointed before the end of January. To conclude, Japan joins others in congratulating the people of Libya for exercising their political rights through peaceful and transparent municipal elections. It expresses hopes for political stability in the future. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan for their statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. Let me start by thanking Officer in Charge Curry for your briefing and for your continued leadership of UNSMIL. We commend your efforts to reconstitute long overdue political dialogue. Successful national elections are essential to ensure long-term stability in Libya. I want to thank Ambassador Yamazaki for your briefing and congratulate you for your participation over the course of your 2 years on the Security Council. I want to welcome the participation of the Libyan PR in this meeting. And finally, Mr. Omar, I would like to thank you for your briefing and for your advocacy for greater accountability in Libya. We stand with all those demanding an end to human rights abuses, working to protect vulnerable and marginalized communities, and safeguarding fundamental freedoms for the Libyan people. Colleagues, let's be clear. The status quo in Libya, especially with regards to the political solutions, is unsustainable. That is what we heard this morning from Ms. Khoury. And without a chance, Libya would eventually face deeper divisions, the further erosion of Libyan sovereignty, and a return to violence. We need a new political process in Libya, as difficult as that might seem. And we continue to believe the UN is the best placed international actor to lead that process. The United States also supports her proposal to hold parallel conversations in a more inclusive format. Real progress on the political future of Libya requires leaders to make tough compromises on contentious issues. But here's what we know. That kind of compromise is possible. The resolution of the central bank crisis demonstrated that. Consensus-based solutions brought about through dialogue are not out of reach. They are essential. Colleagues, there is a pending Libyan request before the Security Council to strengthen coordination and information sharing among Libyan security forces, as well as Libya's counter-terrorism and border security capabilities. We fully support Libya's request to promote East-West integration, which is in the spirit of the security integration objectives enshrined in numerous Council resolutions and supported by Libya's 5+5 Joint Military Commission. Progress toward military integration and the broader reunification of Libyan institutions is key to reaffirming Libya's sovereignty and preventing Libya from becoming enmeshed in regional conflict. We must also all encourage all sides to work on agreement toward a unified East-West budget that would reflect the equitable distribution of Libya's all revenues for the benefit of all Libyans. There is increasing recognition among Libyans of the need to eliminate oil for fuel offsets to address the fiscal deficit and ensure Libya's economy is on a sustainable path. More broadly, Libya's long-term economic stability hinges on the apolitical nature and technocratic integrity of key economic institutions, including the Central Bank of Libya, the National Oil Corporation, and the Audit Bureau. Effective governance is key to the future of Libya and to people's faith in the institutions of their country. Turning to sanctions, I want to thank Ambassador Yamazaki for the briefing on the Libyan Sanctions Committee and look forward to the renewal of Libya's sanctions regime. We also thank the panel of experts for previously briefing the Sanctions Committee and for their continued gold standard public reporting and independent analysis on implementation of UN processes, on UN sanctions, We should all be concerned by the panel's reports on transfers of military equipment and flagrant violations of the UN arms embargo, including Russian naval vessels unloading military material at Tobruk port. We're also deeply concerned by the illicit export of petroleum and petroleum products, which benefit criminal organizations at the expense of the Libyan people. It's critical that the panel remain focused on this issue, particularly regarding information on those who are benefiting from this trafficking. Finally, we welcome the panel of experts' identification of individuals and entities involved in embargo and other violations of UN-mandated sanctions. We're committed to using sanctions to deter threats to peace and stability in Libya. That peace and that stability have eluded Libya for far too long, but change is always within reach. And so I call on this council to do everything possible to support the Libyan people as they write a better future for themselves. Thank you. I resume my functions as president of the council. I now give the floor to the representative of Libya.
Sayyida Raisa. Madam President, at the outset, I thank you for convening this meeting. I also thank Madam Stephanie Khoury for her briefing, and I seize this opportunity to thank the representative of Japan for his ceaseless efforts during his chairmanship of the Sanctions Committee. I would be remiss not to thank Malta, Mozambique, Switzerland, Ecuador for their efforts during the last 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, and members of UN teams and representatives past and present, I believe after what we have heard today that you owe an apology to the Libyan people. Yes, because after listening to these briefings and the procrastination and the UN plans, Libyans feel they live in a repeated episode of the same TV drama with the same events and director and even the same actors with only slight changes. We have listened today to Madam Khoury's briefing and her plan, which we take note of. We have also listened to the briefings of the council members. And once again, the only commonality is admitting a stalemate and lack of a clear vision or time frame, while the upcoming political process remains elusive. This comes at a time when the world witnesses developments that have rendered this council more divided than in the past, which leads us to question if there is sincerely an international intention to resolve the crisis in my country. As a reminder, during these same days, years before, Libyans were registering themselves in polling centers, dreaming of a bright future that removes them from the transitional phase that have continued for more than 10 years. hoping that the country will be united and the state's institutions will be legitimate. And here, once again, we add years to the previous years, and none of the dreams have been achieved, and the political stalemate continues, and the division is the characteristic of the time. As you have followed a month ago, Libyans have voted to elect their representatives in close to 60 municipalities throughout Libya. This was the first national election that coincided with the elections in the different municipalities. And upcoming elections will include around 60 more municipalities next January. This election process last month, under the supervision of the High Elections Committee and the government and its different agencies, and without any recorded violations, is further proof that the Libyan people, when the circumstances are conducive, will continue the process towards democracy and stability. This success that has been witnessed in multiple areas throughout Libya proves as well that elections can be held despite the challenges, which confirms that the challenges are not about logistics but about political will. Ladies and gentlemen, when we hear from you that it is important that the political resolution must be led by Libyans, Libyans wonder, why are we neglecting their desire? Why, when national initiatives are presented, why are they not integrated? And why our practical measures are not developed to understand their desire about their future, the future that has been manipulated by a minority and through negative external interventions? Therefore, national dialogue remains the ideal process to overcome the differences and to reach a consensus on general elections as soon as possible. Such consensus will address the pending issues to develop electoral laws that can be achieved and implemented. This requires an inclusive dialogue led by Libyans and with wide participation from the different parties and segments of society. It must be based on previous progress and must respect the political presence in Geneva and the participation of all institutions. This must be the primary reference to reach a lasting resolution. Uniting the state institutions and direct elections is what the different political agreements have pursued, leading to the existing bodies, last of which is the Geneva roadmap, which has not been respected. This is the goal that Libyans have aspired to in December 2021, and it has not been achieved. And until today, who were the agitators, whether they were individuals or states? Why do you expect that the Libyans will trust the new processes to be proposed? This is the question. Therefore, any new political process or new political agreement that does not focus on holding general elections is only a prolongation of the crisis that my country experiences. The Libyan people are sick and tired of repeated and failed attempts. These attempts have made the building of their state elusive. The Libyan people are sick and tired of time wasting. When every attempt faces a questioning of legitimacy, the Libyan people are sick of a lack of constitution that outlines the nature of the state. Therefore, out of respect for our people, this Council must adopt a decisive stance, rejecting the attempts by some to expand the divisiveness either through unilateral measures or through intervening in national affairs. Madam President, Libya is not far from the rapid developments in the region because there are multiple interventions from outside parties, and there's international greed that focus on Libya, and the events in Sudan now and their implications are well known to everyone. Therefore, uniting the security apparatus under a civilian leadership is necessary and must be top priorities for the current phase and must lead to the results of the 5+5 Commission to support the stability in the country and to combat crime and organized crime and supporting the political process. These will all contribute directly and effectively to achieve sovereignty over the entire Libyan territory and end foreign presence and make weapon the monopoly of the state. Ladies and gentlemen, reconciliation is a pillar of stability in Libya. In this regard, we applaud the role of the African Union in achieving Libyan reconciliation, and the high-level committee that has visited Libya last October and in December as well to prepare for a national reconciliation conference that will be held next year. In this regard, days ago, a meeting was held in Tunisia that included representatives of the Presidential Council and the House of Representatives and the State Council to discuss a draft reconciliation law presented by the Presidential Council. Therefore, we call on the United Nations and the international community to provide greater support to this process and to support it as a means to address all other political issues and security and economic issues, so that Libyans can adopt a national charter that will renew trust. We emphasize that national reconciliation must be connected to principles of transitional justice, truth, transparency, admission of fault, compensation, and return of refugees and displaced persons, and revealing the fate of missing persons. Only through such measures we can achieve national reconciliation. In conclusion, and briefly, it is important to remind you that the successive transitional phases do not serve the stability that Libya must live and the region. It does not support the stability of our neighboring countries or the Sahel or the Mediterranean. The Libyan people are sick and tired of you exploiting their country as a grounds for international experiments and the application of the same mechanisms and the same treatments that have proven failure for a decade. You cannot continue to offer the same medicine to cure the same disease and expect different results. Therefore, if you are sincere in supporting Libya and the influence on Libya and the proxy wars on our territory and only contribute to create conducive circumstances for national initiatives and reveal the agitators and their supporters, whether they were individuals or groups or states. Only as such stability will be achieved in Libya and the region, and only then will we take the first step towards building a modern Libyan state. Libya, who through stability and its capacities can be inclusive of everyone. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Libya for their statement. There are no more names. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. I now invite council members to informal consultations to continue our discussion on the subject. The meeting is adjourned.